In this presentation, we're going to discuss the general steps in leading change in Fire and Emergency Services Administration. In the private sector, change is driven by competition. Businesses need to innovate to survive and meet the needs of customers. They need to stay ahead of their competition to avoid going out of business. In the public sector, change is driven by the need to improve services. Change may take the form of additional staff, expanded services, improved equipment, higher standards for training, and education for personnel. Creating change can be challenging. Although there is no one guaranteed path for creating change, there are some general steps that can be identified. The first step in creating change is to identify the need for change and create a sense of urgency. There is a need for buy-in from the members in any case where change will be implemented. So it's a good idea to get some support from maybe 10 to 15% of members before starting a formal change process. In the public sector, the need for support from elected officials is also important. It is more difficult for public administrators to create a sense of urgency than for private administrators, who always have to be thinking about adapting to their competition. The tax revenue that pays for fire and EMS services in most cases is consistent year to year. Nonetheless, a sense of urgency may be created by things like budget cuts or layoffs, or the closing of fire stations, or the need to replace old equipment. The chief officer may need to be patient before leading change. He or she may need to wait for a good opportunity to advocate for changes, such as a major catastrophic event. Unfortunately, it sometimes takes a catastrophic event, like a natural disaster, for the public and elected officials to realize the need for better resources. It is difficult for a chief officer to order change and implement it without the help of a coalition. A strong guiding coalition with the right composition, level of trust, and shared vision is key to successful change. The members of the guiding coalition should be committed to achieving the same goal, and the purpose of this committee is to implement change. The third step is to develop a vision. Vision plays a key role in helping to direct, align, and inspire the actions of large numbers of people. In most cases, the leader is the source of the proposed change. However, this does not mean the proposed change is an original idea. Many times, a proposed change is an idea borrowed from another jurisdiction. Public administrators often propose changes based on what other jurisdictions have implemented, like when city managers push for funding for new bike paths because neighboring communities are building them. Developing a vision based on what other communities are doing also lends credibility to the idea. The job of the leader is then to propose the change and communicate it effectively to members and elected officials. The next step after developing a vision is to then communicate that vision effectively. A leader must be able to communicate their vision to members of the organization in a clear and concise way. When communicating to members or elected officials, using analogies can sometimes help explain your vision, and that may be useful. Written and verbal communication skills are key in effectively communicating a vision, as is creating a sense of urgency without creating a sense of panic. Step 5 is to overcome barriers to change. Common barriers include tradition, lack of resources, insufficient staffing, and resistance from members, government officials, or even the public. The most important steps to overcoming barriers is to first identify them. After barriers are identified, convincing members, elected officials, and the public that the barrier is damaging to the quality of emergency services becomes an important task. A leader will encounter resistance to change from staff, government officials, and the public. Supervisors and members are often resistant to change. It is the leader's job to reduce resistance by doing things like incorporating supervisors and members into the decision-making process and allowing those who are resistant to change to voice their concerns. Step 6 is to create short-term goals. While working toward long-term goals and implementing substantial change, it is always good to have checkpoints to monitor progress. If you have a goal of significantly decreasing response times, it is good to monitor the response times to see how the firehouse is progressing toward the goal. Short-term goals should have the following characteristics. They should be visible to the entire organization, have clear, unambiguous outcomes, and the outcomes should be the direct consequence of the change that has been implemented. The final step in creating change is to institutionalize it. For a change to become permanent, it has to be accepted in the underlying organizational culture. This process takes time and is often invisible from the day-to-day work. Leaders should be sure that new hires are trained to meet the expectations of the organizational culture. It is also important to lead by example to help institutionalize the change. If leadership does not lead by example, then the implemented change is unlikely to become permanent and part of the organizational culture.